Here's how most leaders lose. Not because of bad people, but because of bad stories. Think about it. You have a salesperson who shows up late, and your first thought, your story is, they're just lazy. And next, you have a technician, right, who misses a step in an RO, or maybe doesn't write a great story for warranty. And your thought is, they're lazy. Or your boss questions you on a number, and you think, he just doesn't respect me. Can you see the power of the story? It determines everything about what you think, what you see, how you feel, and most importantly, how you behave. Here's the problem. When you make up destructive stories, you destroy speed, trust, and execution. And the longer you live in those stories, the more money that you lose. There is a direct correlation between time and story and money lost. I'm Chris Hunsicker, and this is the Dealership War Room. Leadership Fire, 7 minutes, built daily, fueled intentionally, and delivered relentlessly. And today, we're going to dive into how to tell a better story. So let's get started. So now we're at step 2 of the trigger process. If you remember yesterday, we talked about step 1, which is own the trigger. They're your triggers, they're your emotions, you have to own them. Now we're at step 2 in the process, which is flip the story. And let's dive into how specifically can you start flipping the story. When you get triggered, your brain races to fill the gap. And that gap becomes a story. And if you don't control the story will control you. Here's what most leaders forget. And this is something that my clients call a Chrisism, because I say this so often, they repeat it, which is, if you're going to make up a story, make up a good story and not a bad one, because it's your story and you're making it up. Why would you make up a story that's a bad story that makes you feel angry, hurt, upset, rejected, whatever you want, when you're the author of the story? So here's the truth. If you're going to make up a story, make up a good story, not a bad one. Think about this. A salesperson is late for a sales meeting. Story A, they don't care, they're disrespectful, you get hot, call them out, you create tension. Now you've lost the room and everybody shuts down. Story B, maybe they got stuck with a customer. Maybe their kid was sick. You still address it, but this time with curiosity and not condemnation. And ask yourself, which of these two stories preserves trust? Which of these two stories keeps the energy in the room? Think about how valuable energy is. We do everything we can to create that positive vibe, that energy, that emotion, so that, best time to sell a car is right after you sold a car, because the energy, the ether is there. And our number one job as a leader is to protect and preserve that energy. So ask yourself, which story protects the energy? Which story keeps the momentum? Which story allows you to execute? The difference between these two stories isn't soft, it's dollars. It matters. The leader who knows how to flip the story keeps buy-in high, turnover low, and momentum and energy intact. And that is what drives sales. So if stories create or cost you dollars, let's take a look specifically at what's the ROI of the skill of flipping a story. Think turnover costs. Every time your destructive story pushes somebody out, you're losing between $20,000 and $40,000 in real hard turnover costs in rehiring, retraining, and lost sales. How about customer trust? When your team sees you telling negative stories about customers, you know what they do? They mirror it. And that costs you CSI and future business. How you talk about customers is how they think about customers when they talk to them. Think about execution speed. Leaders stuck in negative stories slow everything down with drama. Whereas leaders who know how to flip the story, they move fast, keep focus, and they drive growth. Peter Swain, one of the best marketers out there in the world, and probably the best AI guy that I've ever known, he has a great saying, and he says, in business, there are only two things, numbers and drama. And either as a leader, you are building and creating focus on drama, slowing you down, or you're building and creating focus on numbers, speeding things up. Flipping the story moves you from drama to numbers. This is not about being naive. This is about being smart. Remember, it is numbers or drama, and your story is what drives you to drama or it drives you to numbers. So when you take time, assume positive intent first, then deal with reality. That is how you protect your culture and your profits. So now let's take a look at how specifically do you do that. I call this the story flip framework. Let's dive in. Number 1, catch the story first. Start noticing, where does your brain go to blame? They're lazy, they don't care, they're stupid. Where does your brain go to blame? That's the first thing you need to do. Number 2, ask the second question. This is so critical. What else could be true? Instead of closing the book, open your curiosity. Number 3, choose the better story. Not the easiest one where you go right to blame, And not the rosy one where you have fake positive and you're overly saccharine sugary. Choose the one that allows you to build trust, to speed execution, and keep ROI intact. Because when you flip the story, you flip the outcome. Now, let's look at today's insight to action bridge. And this may be the most important thing that I'm going to share with you for both your home life and your professional life. So, next time you find yourself getting triggered, I want you to catch yourself and stop and ask this question: what's the story I'm making up? And what else or what other story could be true? Think about this next time that you find yourself super frustrated with a child at home or with someone at work. Stop and ask yourself, hey, what's the story I'm making up here? And what else or what other story could be true? In other words, what's a better story? Now, when you find yourself spiraling, which is often what happens, in that moment when you pause, when you get that gap between stimulus and response, now I want you to grab a pen and write down both stories. And then ask yourself, which one of these stories builds trust and connection? Which one of these stories builds speed and execution? Which one of these stories allows me to get more done? So let's do a bonus insight to action assignment here. And this is best done as an evening reflection. So do this in the evening with a nice cup of tea, a glass of wine, a Diet Coke or beer, whatever it is that you use. If you're a real morning person, feel free to do this in the morning with a great cup of coffee. But here's what I'd like you to do. If you're a journaler, grab your journal and write this answer in your journal. If not, just get a piece of paper and write this down, because thinking on paper is the best way to do this. This is the question I'd like you to write the answer to. How much is my negative storytelling costing my dealership? And how much is my negative storytelling costing my family? It will change your life. You don't control who comes in late, who misses a step, or who asks that probing question, but you are always in control of the story that you attach to it. You are ridiculously in charge of your own life. Flip the story and you flip the culture, the profits, and the pace. Tomorrow, we dive into step 3 of the trigger process and how elite leaders forgive fast and reset momentum instantly. But for today, go out, start paying attention to your team, connection, trust, speed, execution, and create some leadership fire. And I'll see you tomorrow in the Dealership War Room.